Welcome to the Abundant Soul podcast. In this episode, we have a very special guest, Victoria Frace. Victoria is a certified life coach who helps guide women to get out of their heads and back into their bodies so they can start accessing their intuition and inner wisdom that has been there all along. By helping them learn how to regulate their nervous system, they start trusting their decisions and release what is no longer in alignment with what they truly want, so they can make room to call in their relationships and experiences they desire. After going through her own healing journey, both emotionally and physically, Victoria was able to transform her life from feeling like she was just surviving to now thriving and living the life that lights her up daily. Today, she finds fulfillment in guiding others through their own similar but unique journeys. Victoria enjoys living an active, healthy lifestyle, spending time in nature, and taking her pup out to the beaches where she lives in Florida to soak up the sun. Let's give a warm welcome to Victoria. Good morning, ladies. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Today we have the honor to have Victoria, and I'm so excited. We met Victoria, a year and almost a half ago now, at Christine Hassler's Women's Retreat. And during this podcast, you have heard a lot for us talking about Christine Hassler. So, and I don't know, we connected with Victoria. We were sitting in the same row, and it's such an honor to have you here today. So thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
And I know that you have such a powerful story. So now you are a life coach. However, you've been through a lot of challenges that brought you to do this kind of work, and you do also inner child work. So do you want to start by sharing a little bit of your background and what made you do the life coaching?
Yeah, wow. Well, that's a very long journey, but I will try to condense it. So what I'll share is how I ended up getting into life coaching. Well, I'll back it up all the way back to the year of 2014, which was probably one of the most difficult, hardest years I ever had. So during that time, I went for my yearly pap smear at my gynecologist, and I had always had normal pap smears, nothing ever. I just go in and found out that I had some abnormal cells in cervical cancer, and obviously I had to get that taken care of and treatment, and that's been kind of like a whole 10-year long journey up until my hysterectomy a couple years ago. However, during that time too, in addition to that health struggle, I was just exiting a very toxic, emotionally, physically abusive relationship. And I also had cut ties off with my parents as well too. So that all together was obviously probably one of the most challenging years of my life, and was in a really, really dark spot for a while. Fast forward through my journey, but it was January of 2021. During this time, I had a couple procedures back in 2014 to eliminate the cervical cancer, and I just had to go for pap smears every 3 months since then. And fast forward to January of 2021, I got another abnormal pap smear, which they did another procedure to remove more of my cervix, and was basically told hey, if you get another abnormal pap smear, you're going to have a hysterectomy because there's no more of your cervix to remove to take out any additional cancerous cells. And during this time, I was also in a relationship, one where, how should I say this? So one where he was an emotionally unavailable person. He had a lot of stuff that he still hadn't resolved from his past and prior relationships. And it was a relationship where I honestly felt very, very alone and very stressed. This was all during COVID too, throughout 2020. So we were all experiencing stress on some type of level at that point. And what I noticed too, one of the things that I learned is, because as I'm sure you guys know, like any type of like trauma, stress, anxiety, like chronic things like that, it manifests through the body, right? So anytime I've had an abnormal pap smear or cervical cancer or cancer cells came back, it was always during a time period where I was going through like really hard stuff. Yeah. And so, during this time, when I had the abnormal pap smear and back in 2021 and was like, okay, I'm going to take control. I'm actually going to decide to proactively get the hysterectomy because I don't want to go back to the doctor every 3 months and be like, okay, is it time to get a hysterectomy now? Is my pap normal, abnormal? Like, let me take control. I went and froze my eggs. And during this time, it's when I was actually introduced to Christine Hassler, and actually was going through one of her programs where we deep dived into a lot of things, but one of those things being inner child work. And I hired my first somatic therapist as well too. So really took a deep dive into somatics and how powerful that was, like releasing patterns and trauma and everything that really was no longer serving me. I was in these like survival patterns throughout my relationships or my health or whatnot, and that really came to light. So yeah, I would say that was kind of like the beginning of my really deep dive personal development journey. Really at that point I had been in therapy for years, but it just kind of felt kind of like stuck, like, hey, like I'm talking about the things, but like nothing's changing, right, outwardly in my life. And the same things are repeating themselves, like types of relationships and situations and stuff like that. So long story short, through that like journey from then up until now, it's like I have like a wealth of like this information that has been utterly like life-changing for me, and I couldn't not see myself wanting to serve others in similar ways, right, and help them get through tough times of like them just feeling stuck or things aren't working out or they're attracting the same type of things over and over again, and they're like, what do I do? So that's kind of what transpired, or I should say, that's kind of what led me to where I'm at now.
Well, I wanted to say thank you for sharing all that. And it's interesting what you said about things manifesting in the body, right? So whatever's kind of going on in your life or that kind of stuff. I'm really intrigued by that. And were you aware of it at the time, or was that stuff that was coming up with what you were reading or like in therapy, or was it something that was like in hindsight, I can now see that was happening?
Yeah, definitely hindsight, right? Because, especially within Western medicine, and especially with like cervical cancer and HPV, like you go to the doctor and they essentially say, like, hey, we don't really know what causes some people to clear HPV versus not HPV. Like a majority of people have it. And, if you smoke, maybe there's an increased chance of, but that's really the only thing that we can connect to people having abnormal pap smears or precancerous cells or whatnot. And so I was always the mindset of like, okay, this is something that I can't control, right? This is something that like, it's just the luck of the draw sort of thing. And it wasn't really until I started reflecting back over the years and like the periods of time where I was having abnormal pap smears, I was like, holy crap, like this is when I was like in the thick of stuff, when these like it would come back. And that's why I think like for me it's so important that I have like my own self-regulating practice, like daily spiritual practice of meditation and prayer and somatic releases, because I know like if as long as I keep this channel like clean, and I mean to the best of my ability, right, life's gonna life, we're always gonna be there's gonna be some stressors and stuff as we deal with everything, but it's just in general just so important for me, and kind of like the message that I want to get out to women too, like how important even just like nervous system regulation is, because I think a majority of us in like the hustle culture of the past 10-20 years of whatnot, it's like we don't even realize that we're in survival mode, right? Like I used to walk around thinking that like this massive tightness in my chest was normal. Like I thought, and I'll tell a funny story here. Before I got my hysterectomy, I actually did a solo trip out to Zion National Park. And yeah, it was amazing. And I went out, and at first I was really nervous, right? Like my mind will wander and go to, oh my gosh, what if the Airbnb, he's a killer and buries bodies under his house,
Yes.
and I'm out here, single female, going out, blah, blah, blah. As soon as I got to the airport, all of that anxiety and like stress or worries or what ifs completely disappeared. And I had never been, it was such an empowering experience. I had never been just so relaxed. Like the tightness in my chest that I felt probably 98% of the time was non-existent, right? Like it was, obviously being out in nature and sometimes help, but something about like disconnecting from the world, disconnecting from work, disconnecting from all the stressors at home. I was like, wow, like I was like, do people actually walk around like this every day? Like, do they walk around without like this tightness and like, heart racing and stressed about work emails and stuff like that? And I was like, how do I bottle this up and bring this home? Like, I want to just pour it into a bottle and bring it home with me. And so fast forward like a month later, a month or two later, I ended up getting my hysterectomy. And during that time, I was out of work for about 6 weeks. So, and I had always wanted to get into meditation, and I would try it here and there, but I was never consistent. There would always be an excuse. Like I'd wake up and be like, well, I have a lot of work to, do today. Like, let me rush to work and get that done. I don't have time for this, right? But when I was recovering from my surgery, I had 6 weeks to do absolutely whatever I wanted, right? Like, well, not whatever I wanted. I couldn't get that physically
No more
active,
excuses.
but
No more excuses.
yes, there's no more excuse for me not to meditate. And I got consistent with it every morning. It was low barrier to entry. I'm like, okay, like I'm not going to do something and then get distracted. I'm just turning on a meditation as soon as I wake up from my phone. And I did it. And for about, I would say, it took about maybe 3-4 weeks of that consistently every day. And when I tell you, I experienced like then the same feeling that I had at Zion National Park of like little to no stress whatsoever. And I was like, okay, well maybe because is this because I'm not working, right? I'm gonna go back to work. I'll still do the meditation every morning, but I bet it's gonna come flooding back. And like, of course, minor stressors here and there came through work, there's deadlines and stuff to meet, but overall, like the amount of anxiety and overwhelm I felt on a daily basis by incorporating meditation on a daily consistent basis significantly reduced.
Wow.
The power of meditation and going within. And I'm very curious, you mentioned also somatic work. So what kind of work did you do? Did you do it before more on a regular basis and now more sparingly? Or are you continuing to do it? How did that work for you?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And it's funny, when I first began working with the somatic therapist, she was actually just getting into it herself. So when she was going through schooling to get certified, and she's like, hey, do you mind? She's like, she prefaced it with like, hey, it might seem like a little woo-woo, but are you willing to try it? And at that point I was like, I'm willing to try anything. I'm going through a lot, so sure. And it was like, I didn't realize how disconnected I was from my body and how your body is connected to like your emotions and what you're experiencing on a daily basis. So even when simple questions of like, okay, you just told me about this experience that has you stressed out, where are you feeling that in your body? What does it feel like? What does it remind you of? Like, what's the earliest time that you remember having that feeling? And really, it was mind-blowing to me to be like, oh, like a lot of these times when I'm being triggered, it's not my adult self that's being triggered. It's trauma from a prior experience when I was little. And by trauma, I don't necessarily mean like, acute, crazy, capital T trauma. It could be as little as like, hey, I really wanted to, go play on the playground. And my mom was like, no, you can't. You have to do X, Y, and Z. And feeling like I didn't have a voice or any autonomy or whatnot, right? It's something as silly as that. Like that type of stuff is in your body until you actually like process it and release it. And so by going through that work, I was able to release a lot of that stuff. And like, it was just so now I'm a lot more cognizant of like, okay, when I do have something come up, like, hey, is this my adult self that's being triggered here? Or, and this is where the inner child work piece gets tied in, Or is it something that my inner child needs right now that I need to address and let her speak her mind and let her have a voice right now? And then coming back to the adult situation and being like, okay, I can come to it and respond to it from a more grounded space. So,
Wow. So, oh my gosh, I love that. Um, if someone has never done inner child work, and also if you can kind of dive into what somatics mean, because I think some of our listeners may not know, they may not know like what does somatics mean, what is that work, but also if someone has never thought about their inner child or connected, is there something that you found where you're like it like a meditation with yourself? I know that you were discussing like coaching or anything, or like something simple that someone could be like get in touch or like explore that if you've never had an experience and you're like, wait, talk to my inner self, my little self, like, wait, what is that? How do you even do that? What does that even mean?
right, right. You're like, what do you mean talk to my little self that's inside me? Like there's a child inside my body? Like, what are
Right?
you
You're like,
talking
what?
about, crazy woman? So I'll answer the first question first. So like what I mean by somatic, so soma actually means body. So when if you're working with like a somatic practitioner, it's really getting connected to the experience that's happening like within your body, right? So you might have these thoughts of like, all the what ifs and worries and X, Y, and Z, but normally there's some type of physiological response that's going on in your body, right? Or maybe you feel like, a burning sensation in your gut or a tightness in your chest or your shoulders shrug up and you're really tight and there's like, oh my gosh, like I need a massage because my shoulders just hurt so much from just like sitting here, right? So that's what I mean about like somatics and being able to like A, having the awareness of what's going on in your body, and then B, being able to then release that energy, because the energy is just energy, right? And that energy wants to get up, like come up and out, right? It wants to move, so allowing it to be able to be released, so then you can be in a more regulated state. And then what was your second question? I forget.
Oh, like if
Oh, was it?
someone has never, if they're like,
Okay.
what? How do I talk to my inner self, my inner child?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you can actually connect to your inner child. And like what I want to preface it is, if you've never done this work before, it can be kind of hard to access your inner child, right? Because you've never accessed them before. They might your inner child, it's not a woo-woo thing. It's actually a psychological reality that is studied like within psychology. So at first, like sometimes I do preface it with clients like, hey, this might seem a little woo-woo just because like, we don't really talk about this, right? This isn't part of people's everyday vernacular that they're used to. And so I would say the easiest way, or one of the ways I should say, because it's different for everyone, is getting into kind of like a meditative state, like really grounding yourself, right? Taking a few deep breaths. You can even have a picture of yourself when you were little, whether it be 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, really whatever age. And as you settle yourself down and really kind of take a few deep breaths and close your eyes, like just imagine that little one. Like imagine like, what is she doing? Where is she, right? Is she on the playground? Is she sitting on her bed? Is she hugging a stuffed animal? Like just really imagine her being there, like her essence. And even if you don't have a lot of memories from childhood, because a lot of people don't, right? Like some people are like, I just really don't have any memories. Like that's okay. Like it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm remembering this specific time I was on a bed and hugging my stuffed rabbit. Like no, it's just like the essence, right? Like her spirit that you're kind of connecting to. And just asking her, like saying hi, like introducing yourself, right? So like if it were Stephanie, it'd be like, hi little Stephanie, like I'm big Stephanie. And you can place maybe a hand on your heart, a hand on your stomach if that feels good. And just starting a conversation and asking her like, how are you? It can be as simple as that, right? And what are you feeling right now? Or is there anything that you wanna say to me? And a lot of people, or a couple of my clients where, and my inner child will do this too if I don't connect to her on a regular basis and I've been a little slacking. She might be a little pissed. Like, yeah, I'm kind of mad. Like, where were you to protect me? Like, and there's always, you can cut this part out because I feel like I'm kind of rambling. But I forget where I'm going with that train of thought. But yeah, that's definitely one of the ways. I think the easiest way is to get a picture of yourself. You can even draw a picture of yourself, and you don't need to have any type of artistic ability, right? Another way is to write to your inner child, right? So like write to your inner child with your dominant hand, and then and if you're asking her a question for her to respond to, is using your non-dominant hand to write out the response. And that's another way to connect.
I'm intrigued with that.
I love that exercise, by the way. Like the things that comes out from your non-dominant hand, like it's surprisingly. And you can use colors and crayons, like being creative, you can draw, you can write, like depending on the age, sometimes it's different ages as well. Oh yeah, questions about that. Is it one age or several age when you talk with your inner child?
Yeah, because it could be multiple different ages. And I'll even share just like a personal story of something that I went through recently that, I was really taking the time to connect to my inner child on a regular basis because she was really activated and triggered. And this was later last year. I was going through a breakup, and my ex and I were separating. We were both moving out of the house. And there'd be times where like even just driving in the car of like, oh my gosh, I just feel so anxious and so overwhelmed and so sad and all of these emotions. And like, deep down my adult self like knew I was going to be okay. Like, I knew that this was an aligned decision to end this relationship. And I was like, okay, I think this is really like my inner child here really flaring up. And sure enough, when I speak to my inner child, she felt the memory that came alive for me of like, hey, like I first connected to, hey, what am I feeling in my body right now? And when was the last time, what was the earliest time I could remember as a child having this feeling? And it was having this anxiety of me being at school and afraid that my parents weren't going to pick me up, right? So this feeling of like abandonment. And that it's funny because that actually never happened. I never was like abandoned at school, but like there was always this like severe fear of like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I'm going to have to figure out how to walk home or blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and that was the age that was really popping up, that like fear of abandonment wound of, hey, I'm going to be all alone, X, Y, and Z. And so she would even, like I said, I'd be driving in the car and I'd have her sit right next to me in the car. And I would even put my hand over and hold her hand and be like, it's okay. Like, I know you felt like you were alone back then when you were a little kid and there was no one there to protect you. But I'm here now. I am here to protect you. I'm always going to be here. You're never going to be alone. You're never going to be abandoned. And immediately, like, and this would be all on like my drive to work, right? Like, and then by the time I get to work, I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like, she's here knowing that, hey, whenever she needs me, she can reach out to me, and then I'm going to continue to check in with her, over the next few days. But yeah, I find inner child work and somatics are probably one of the most, for me personally, like powerful healing tools I've experienced.
I second that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like what... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say on a side note, Victoria helped me also go through one of my own trauma regarding borders. So I was afraid of, as I got older, I got afraid to go through borders. And I mean, and when I got older, it's like less than a year ago. So I asked Victoria to guide me because even though I was doing the work by myself, I was not finding the words that my inner child needed to hear, and Victoria guided me, and now I don't have any issues or anxiety going through borders, so that is very powerful.
Yeah.
I second that.
Yeah, that's amazing. The work you did, Stephanie, like even just watching you go through that transformation and healing of that to on the other side, I remember you messaging me being like, hey, I traveled and had zero anxiety going through borders and customs and everything. I was like, oh my gosh, like that just made me so happy.
Thank you.
I love the tool that you said about finding meditation too, because when you were talking about your story to Zion and everything, that totally resonated because I love to travel and I feel like it's almost like I'm a different person when I travel. Like, not in my real life, like in my regular day to day is what I mean. Um, like waking up in the morning is hard for me. I'm like groggy. I'm not my best self. But when I'm like not at home and I'm traveling and I'm in nature, I'm like wake up early. And then I'm like, is this escapism? Am I just like running away from things? But I think it's that kind of what you said where it's like you unplug, you don't have that work stuff, it's already established like I am going to be gone, so there's like things are taken off my plate. And I loved how you said like how can I bottle this up, how can I feel like this more, how can I bring this into my everyday life. Because I think I know for me I tend to overthink and overdo things and can create a lot of unneeded stress. And so I was like, I just need to be traveling like quarterly and then that'll keep me balanced. But when you said like I started doing it daily, I was like, oh, here this is again. And it feels a little resistant. But were you, because I know you said that you had like 6 weeks. Did you ever find any resistance, like, okay, this isn't working, I'm not feeling anything, or were you kind of like stair stepping, like, okay, this is getting easier, or I'm getting deeper into it? What was that kind of transition like to begin something like meditation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's funny, and I always tell people this like, hey, when you get into meditation, or if you're wanting it to make it as a part of your regular practice, it's kind of like going to the gym, right? So it's like, you're not going to go to the gym once, twice, 3 times, and then think like, oh, now I'm strong. Here's my muscles, right? Like it's the day in, day out consistency. And it's not sexy, right? Like it's just like you just do the thing and you go in, you go out, just like meditation. Like I pop on, I'll put on a meditation in the morning and it doesn't have to be super long. And I think that's another thing that is a barrier to entry for some people is like, oh man, well, I don't have an hour to like sit and meditate. Like I got kids, I got to commute to work. I got like, parents to take care of, the dog, X, Y, and Z. Like, it can literally be as small as like 5 minutes. And there's plenty of meditations out there, even for like 5 minutes that you can do. And that's what I did. Honestly, like in the mornings, I don't meditate for more than, if I have the extra space and it's the weekend, I might do a longer one. But during the week, 5-10 minutes, like that's it. And I won't say that like, oh, sometimes like, I can really drop in and I feel like even, a difference right after the meditation. But a lot of times like, no, I don't feel drastically different right afterwards. It's just like going to the gym, right? Like you go and do one workout, right? You don't feel drastically different after each workout, right? It's just, but it's the tiny shifts that you'll start to notice as you become more consistent with it. Like for example, I even noticed when I did this, like I used to, well, Stephanie is in New Jersey too, and I'm from New Jersey. I live in Florida now, but I used to have, I'll own it. I used to have pretty bad road rage, right?
Oh yeah.
And I noticed even when it comes to this, I'm like, oh, like I just like let that person in, or hey, that person just cut me off, and I just had zero reaction to it. I was like, okay, you must be busy. Go on ahead, right? Like, why am I? There was no. It was a lot less like triggered, right? A lot less easy to irritate or to get annoyed at something, and that would transpire. That basically was in all areas of my life too, whether it be at work, relationships, family. Like I was a lot less likely to get triggered because I'm just in a more calm, like grounded state. So
I love what you share about consistency. And how do you manage to make you sit every day? Because there are some days it's like going to the gym, like you mentioned. Some days you don't want to do it. Like you're tired, it's like, oh, I don't feel like doing it. How did you have a discipline to make you do it in some way to
Yeah.
be able to be consistent?
Well, I think it was a couple things. I think, I'll speak to, I was in a place where I'm like, something needs to change. Like, I am super stressed out. Kind of like when you hit rock bottom and you're like, I'll do anything at this point. Let me try this thing. So that was a piece of it. Another piece of it too that I would recommend is do it when it's easiest for you. It doesn't matter what time of day. If it's like right before you go to sleep, right? And it's such a passive, almost like modality where it's like you don't have to like do anything, right? I don't have to like sit there and try to connect to my inner child, or I don't need to like write and journal, right? It's just popping on a and I like the guided meditation just because it's something for my brain to focus on. And so, like I said, like I'll meditate first thing in the morning. Alarm goes off. Okay, I'm hopping on the meditation. Like low barrier to entry, right? Like nothing, the day hasn't started. I can't make any excuses. Like just get it done. Or if it's easy, like easier for people at night, like, hey, my mornings are really hectic. My kids crawl into bed, X, Y, and Z. Like, hey, okay, let me pop it in once I put the kids to bed and I'm falling asleep, I'll put it on. So I would say like really just choosing a time of day that works best for you versus, some people are like, oh, well, I need to get to the gym. So it has to be early in the morning because I read in an article like, that's the best time to work out. But if you're not getting yourself out of the bed, does it really matter what time of day that you're going to the gym? Like, no, as long as you're doing the thing. So
That resonates. I feel like I can see how much resistance I had. Ooh, I like that I said had because maybe this is a
I
shift now.
like it.
But when you were like, I don't have time, I was like, yeah, like I'm not a morning person. So like I just am gonna sleep in. But when you're like, you can do it before bed, I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, why was I so rigid? Like this is the way that it needs to be done. You need to do it for 1 hour and you need to feel something afterwards. I know that's like I shouldn't be thinking that way, but I'm like, why am I like that? Like, so thank you for sharing that. I don't know. I felt like it's this permission I didn't know I needed.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I would even say with like, I'm not necessarily always wide awake while I'm doing this meditation. Like my alarm goes off and I'm like, all right, I know I have to get up in 10 minutes. It's not a, cuz and I resonate with that too of like, okay, needing to do this right and I need to like, really think about the meditation in order to get it right so it works. And it's not like that actually. When I started releasing like the having to do it right and it being such like a hard task for it to actually like work and just allowing the meditation to work for you, I think that makes it a lot easier too.
I definitely resonate with what you're sharing. And it's funny because I always say, life has seasons, and sometimes what is working for you for or have been working for a very long time, then it changes. So you have to adapt, and meditation is part of it. Like sometimes it's when you are single and you don't have kids, it could be an hour in the morning and suddenly you have a boyfriend and then you meet, so you have less time in the morning and suddenly you have kids and kids wakes you up, so you have no time in the morning or it's not as consistent. However, finding ways to bring your mindfulness meditations or your personal growth exercises into your day-to-day is such an important piece. And even when things are consistent, sometimes you shift as well. So it's seasons. You have seasons within your day, seasons within the month, seasons within your life, and it changes constantly. So I
Yes.
love what you shared about, finding a time that fits, but knowing that it can always change.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
And regarding that, actually, I'm very curious, how did your, meditation evolve or your personal growth evolve since you started, where it was maybe more difficult to connect with yourself? How did that evolve to this present day now?
Yeah. So so what I'll share too, so and this is kind of really recent, is because I've always had like this connection, especially over the last, 5, 7, however many years to the universe, and really just um, really connecting with nature and feeling like you're part of Mother Earth and all of that. And I went through something recently where, and this is actually well, relatively recently, where I was like, man, I feel really disconnected from the universe right now. I feel really, really disconnected. And I'm like, I can't connect to it. I'm out in nature. And again, it was that trying to like force it because I need it right now because I'm going through a really tough time. And it wasn't until I met with an energy healer. Actually, I think you met the energy healer, Stephanie, when we were
Yes,
at
I
one of
love
the other
her. I
retreats
love
in
her.
Austin. Yeah, she's amazing. And I reached out to her and I was like, listen, I'm having a really hard time. I am having some like, health issues, and there's a lot of anxiety attached to those health issues that are coming up. And she's like, what is your relationship to like God, higher power, whatever you call it? And I was like, well, I like believe in the universe, and and well, she's like, how about this perspective? She's like, because God, higher power, she's like, and again, she's like, I'm not trying to push any type of like agenda or religion or anything on you in any sense, though, but she's like, just hear me out. She's like, the universe is essentially everything, right? It's the good and the bad. It's the good things that happen in the world, the terrible things that happen in the world. It's the sunshine and beautifulness. It's the hurricanes. It's all of it, right? She's like, God or a higher power or whatever, the divine, whatever you want to know, whatever name resonates for you the most. She's like, they created the universe. And she's like, so what is your relationship with, with God, with the higher power? And I was like, oh, like, I kind of all thought it was like the same thing in my brain, Like, I was like, okay. And I think I had, and this is some like subconscious stuff that I worked through myself. It's like this kind of associating God with religion, and me having like the subconscious programming of like, oh, staying away from organized religion, like, right? And not to say I had anything super traumatic happen with my relationship with religion growing up, but there's always something about it that like I didn't resonate with. And it had these beliefs of, okay, well, if you believe in God, then you have to believe that you're either a good person or a bad person, and there's all these rules to follow and X, Y, and Z. And I was like, she's like, what if you start looking at it a little bit differently? She's like, there's so many different ways to go and really connect to God, spirit, higher power, the divine, that doesn't necessarily have to be through a religious entity. And and this is like recent, I've really been deep diving into my relationship with God, right? And what that looks like, and really tapping into his support, his love, his compassion as I'm navigating these like even current challenges in my life that I'm going through. And it has honestly made like a world of a difference. And it's funny because, and I feel like the universe also, this is where the universe is tied into, kind of gives you nudges to go certain directions. And there has been multiple people that I have met recently that would just bring up like how their relationship with God, spirit, help them through a lot of challenging times. And there would be like a fleeting, like the Uber driver, right? Coming home from the airport, it was an Uber driver. It was a friend of a friend that I was out to dinner with that I had never met before, and casually mentioned at the end of a conversation of like, she's like, I've never been religious. She's like, and like while I was going through my divorce, like my faith in God got me through it. And it's just like these little nuggets that like, and this happened probably 5 or 6 times, ladies. Like, it's like, so then when energy here, when Fran was telling me like, hey, having me think about this, I was like, okay, maybe it's time to do a little bit of a deep dive here and see what's here for me. So I don't know if that really answered your question. I kind of went on a tangent there, but
I love that when you have synchronicities. I don't remember where I heard it, but it was something like if you hear something or see something like 3 times, then it's like the universe, God being like, listen, So for you to have like, okay, here's the Uber drive telling, why is he even talking to me about this? Like,
yeah.
here's this person at dinner, and then, all those things. Because sometimes, you can be like, oh, that's interesting, that's a coincidence. And then you're like, okay, this is like flat in my face right now. Like, okay, I should pay attention.
Yep. Yeah. So I've actually incorporated a lot of like prayer and stuff into my meditations as well. So that's kind of how it's kind of like shifted over time as well. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, we had an episode on the power of prayer and kind of like your thoughts and the way you say things and the things, just, yeah, just that connection that you have. And I think I resonate with what you say too, because I didn't grow up with any religion, but I kind of had a feeling about it, and I wasn't sure. Like you said, like it felt like there were a lot of rules, and you didn't want to do something the wrong way. Like there might be repercussions. So I was like, oh, just stay away from it rather than that's an unknown for me, and it seems very there's a lot of rules. So I like that it was kind of helpful to like reframe it and like make it your own and like just hone in on what your connection is, not is it right, is it wrong, where does it fit in, like pigeonhole it somewhere. It's like it's my connection that I have. I like that you said that.
Yeah.
I want to piggyback on that because when we had the card about the prayer, we had some resistance about talking about it because we didn't want to make it religious. So that's why, we brought it into like manifestation in the universe, and it doesn't have to be religious. So we kind of turned into that. But I do love, how it was framed today, where, it's higher, right? There are things that are higher than even the universe. So I love that. And yeah, I resonated a lot. I learned a lot. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
And I love also to see how it evolved from being more from the mind, right? When you started, it was like, okay, how do I heal? How do I fix it? But it was the brain. The brain and the mind was working. It was fixated on a solution, but, like going to see the doctors and how do I treatment, and how you evolve into being more spiritual and healing from within, right? And how did that affect your physical? Like, do you feel more, lighter, like more, you have less pain because you were mentioning that, the trauma can be trapped within your body, and so you can feel like tensions. So how do you feel now today, and how are you able to resolve it quickly? Or
Yes, yeah, that's a really good question, and I'll share like a little story. It happened probably a few months before my ex and I split up, and for a little while, like I knew the relationship that I was in like just wasn't aligned. Like he was an amazing man, and the healthiest relationship I had been in. I have nothing bad to say about him, and it just it wasn't in alignment with what I truly deeply desired out of a partnership. And I went to bed, and I woke up, Stephanie, in the middle of the night, and my whole entire neck, shoulder, and back were just like clenched up, like so hard. Like nothing happened. I didn't hurt myself at the gym. I didn't pull anything. Like there was no actual trauma. And I woke up in the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning, like excruciating pain. So, I had my my partner at the time, took me to the urgent care, went to the chiropractor, went to X, Y, and Z. And, as soon as I got home, I pulled out my Louise Hay book to be like, and I forget if it was, the chiro said it was like the C5, C6 or whatever vertebrae it was. And I looked, and it was definitely like the meaning of it was associated with like feeling like you're holding everything. And at that point, like I felt like I was holding a lot of stuff in the relationship on my own, and having to like do all the things to move it forward. And I was like, wow, like this is definitely emotionally, energetically connected. It wasn't because I hurt myself at the gym. So as soon as we split up, and that has never occurred, or I go to the chiro, he's like, yeah, that issue's no longer there, like it's fine, it's resolved. So yeah, I mean, overall I would say like with my practices, like I just I do feel like a lot lighter, and because I'm more connected to my body, when something does show up, it's then an invitation for me to kind of do a deep dive and be like, okay, what's present here? Is this actually like an injury just because, like, I hurt my knee and it's a prior, surgery, because that could be too. Like, they're all just like physical things. Or is this related to something else? Like, what am I not paying attention to, or turning a blind eye to in my life externally, or ignoring? And now it's manifesting through my body, and my body's trying to be like, you might want to address this thing over here, right? Like, I'm not going away. So it's beautiful though, right? Like, and I would even say, when a health issue does arise, it's almost like I'm instead of being like, oh, well, why me? Why is this happening? It's like, wow, like, thank you, body, for telling me that something is off and there's something that I need to address here, like within my internal or external world, because clearly there's something I'm ignoring that needs to be addressed, and I need to come back to myself and, hey, what are the parts of my life that, hey, I'm not living either my true authentic self, or what are the things in my life that aren't in alignment with what I truly want.
Wow. Thank you so much. We are coming to the end, but before we go, do you have any advice that you want to give to our listeners?
Advice. So I would say, and this goes for everyone, and especially, females too, is that our bodies have so much internal wisdom, like so much wisdom, that with there's something in your life that feels off, right? Whether that be a relationship or friendship or job or just situation in general, just listen to it. A lot of times, and I'm guilty of this too, like, my brain wants to, until I get the tangible proof that, hey, this thing isn't in alignment with what I want, it's like, it doesn't want to let go. Like, my body is saying, like, oh, something feels off here, right? Like, something just doesn't feel right. Like, I don't know. And my brain is like, yeah, well, they didn't really do anything, or like, they're doing the right things, or X, Y, and Z. Like, there's nothing to say, like, they're doing anything wrong. But no, like, listening into your body, and really just, tapping into it more, and listening to it. Just listening to it.
100%.
Thank you. Yeah.
Love that. I think that's like the perfect way to close this, because it's so important, because it's almost like seeing them as two separate entities instead of like, oh, it's just me. It's like sometimes your mind can be like, yeah, I'm here to protect you, so we're going to be fearful of like, what if, and your heart's like, really? Like,
Yeah.
or like, so just paying attention to your body, and not second guessing. You know what I mean? Because I feel like sometimes you can get in that loop of like, well, I don't know if that's really what I was feeling, and is that gut? Is that like, can I trust that? So I love that, just listening to your body more. And there's so much wisdom. You're so right. Like, there's, we tend to think it's outside of us, but there's so much wisdom inside of us. That's so cool.
Thank you, ladies. It was a pleasure being here today. I loved this conversation.
Thank you so much, and it went so fast. Like,
I know.
I was like soaking everything what you were saying. I'm like, oh. So thank you, and
Yes.
thank you to our listeners who are with us, and we'll talk to you in a little bit. Bye.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. We hope the stories and insights we've shared today have inspired you to embrace your abundant soul and live your life with more presence, purpose, and passion.
Remember, the path to awakening is unique for each of us, but we're all connected by our yearning for deeper meaning and authenticity. So keep an open heart and mind, and trust that the universe will guide you exactly where you need to go.
This has been the Abundant Soul Podcast. See you next Sunday as we continue to explore the depths of spiritual awakening and personal growth.